Welcome to the green room, where today a industry vet, I've been in the industry for over 15 years, is going to talk with a industry newbie about entering the video production space. And I'm basically going to give him the floor to ask me whatever questions that a beginner would be curious in knowing from somebody who has been in the space for a very long time. My name is Rob, and this is Sky. Sky is an intern at my studio here. And so Sky, go ahead, ask away.
All right, awesome. So I just got a couple of questions here for you. Just go through them. What really inspired you to start your own business in the first place? Like really, moved you to get the ground running and start doing what you do now?
So I started a long time ago in sort of more reality-based stuff, and then I transitioned to sports broadcast, and I was working in sports broadcast. So I was doing lots of stuff for the Royals, the Chiefs. First started in-house, then I started doing stuff for the networks, right? And so one day I was doing a UFC fight, and I saw a guy with his own camera, and I just curious. I was like, oh, you make decent money, kind of maybe not the proper question to ask somebody if you don't know them, but still I was curious. And he's like, oh, well, I'm not making what I want to make for this, but it's all right. And I was like, well, how much is that? He's like, $2,000. And I was like, you're making $2,000? And it's like, you just have to have that camera? Because I was there with the network, right? And I was running one of the big cameras, and we were on the TV truck, and we were doing that. And in sports broadcast, at least then, the rates were around $500 to $600, right?
Dang.
For a full day's work. You don't have to own anything, but that's the industry pay in network television.
So regardless of hours, it was the same base pay?
So you get paid that base pay no matter what for up to 10 hours. And then you have a 1 hour break in there. So the way that it would work is, sometimes you'd go there the day before to set up. Sometimes you are only there that day. So let's say that you're only there day of. Live television, it has to be done right the first time because it's live. So you get there 6 hours before the puck drops, before, the first five, before whatever, because if you're setting things up, it's not just the cameras that set up, it runs to the TV truck. It's everything inside the TV truck that's talking to each other. They want to make sure that everything is working properly. So you get there 6 hours ahead of time. So that means that the games, a lot of times games might be 2 hours, right? Some might be 3, some stuff might not be crazy long, but when you get there that early and then you have that amount of time, typically you're out of there around the 10-hour mark. What tends to happen, though, a lot of times on bigger productions is you might get 1 or 2 hours of overtime. So after 10 hours, you kind of get that extra bit of pay. Having said that, when I found out that somebody was there running camera and making more, I was just like, that sounds really, really good. And for people that don't know the industry, they hear, oh, you make $500-600 a day. That's a lot of money.
It's great, yeah.
The thing is that when I first started in the industry, and I was a grip or utility where I'm not doing much, right? I was making $20 per hour. So maybe I make $200 a day. And I was like, okay, that's pretty good, because a lot of people, that's better than a minimum wage job, and that's a pretty decent amount of money, right?
Yeah.
And then when I found out I could be a camera operator, and it's like 40, 50 plus bucks per hour, I was like, I want to do that. And then whenever I hear this guy saying how much he's making, I'm like, that's like $200 an hour, albeit he has to own his own gear. But he also wasn't making how much he thought he could make. So that kind of opened my eyes to, there's more out there. Let's go, find a way to buy a camera and see if I can start to generate that type of revenue, right? Because if I work one day for 500 and he works one day for 2,000, 4 of my days equals 1 of his days.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, you started to look at it that way. A lot of people don't ever look at things in a business way, right? They look at things like, I'm just happy to get what I'm doing, right? The thing to think about is that I need to be aware of is not everybody should or wants to be a business owner, right?
Yeah.
Because the benefit of just working on like where you're not a business is that you just show up, you do your work, and you leave. Your business doesn't go home with you at the end of the day. You don't think about it ever again. You know, work is brought to you, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you might not make as much, but if you enjoy what you're doing and you're making enough to cover your bills, then that's a great living for a lot of people. I have a lot of friends that do it. They love every minute of it, especially like in sports broadcast, they're into sports. Some are traveling with the NFL, with the PGA Tour. You know, if you like those sports, right? Like it's
perfect.
Yeah.
So you were kind of saying something about like, you know, when you're not running the business, you're able to separate yourself from work and home. How do you manage to do that as a business owner? Able to separate, you know, your like work life and your home life, where you're able to kind of go home and not stress about work or stress less.
So I don't think that it's possible to be a business owner and go home and not think about the business. It's just, that's the difference between a business owner and a creative and just somebody that wants to, or just an employee, is that when everything relies on you, there's no way just to turn off and be like, oh, I'm just not going to think about that because I'm going to play, you know, do this for the rest of the night. It's something is always just lingering. And the more systems that you can put into place and people that you can bring on to your team that can then you can start to offload some of that responsibility to, then it allows you to sort of have that calming step back, right? Where you can sort of begin to feel like you can separate work and personal. The issue though is in the creative space, most people, and then I'm guilty of this, they leave a freelance type setup where they're doing camera operator for the network. They're a single DP for, you know, commercials, and they want to start their own business, right? So they go and they're like, I'm going to do everything from, you know, we're going to find the clients, we're going to shoot it, we're going to edit it, we're going to deliver the final product, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing everything start to finish. What happens though is that you just took, you just created a job for yourself because you're doing everything. And when you're doing everything, if you really look at how many hours that you have into it, right, and then into the equipment and into all that stuff, you're not running a business. And I would say that like 80 or 90% of creatives don't have a business, even though they have a company, an LLC, and the business banking account. If it's just them, that's not that was a cold hard fact that I had to learn. It's not a business. And so the way for me to separate my personal life and my work life was by bringing on people that can be on my team and outsourcing things to where I'm not constantly thinking about or worried about those types of things.
Gotcha. You talk about bringing on people, and that kind of brings up the, you know, having good relationships with both clients and other people that you work with. How do you think is the best way to build client relationships? Like, how do you do it?
So am I building a relationship with a client, or am I trying to find a client? Because there's two different things there.
I guess just how do you build a relationship with a client once you've already worked for them? Like, how do you get them coming back to you?
Yeah. So I think that this is another delineation between being a creative and being a business owner. And it's a fine line to walk, because a lot of creatives, you know, they love it for the art of what they're doing. And a lot of businesses that you're working with and people that are paying you money, if they're paying you money, they're paying you money for a purpose, right? There's a reason, and many times that reason is because they're going to get a value out of that video. And so when you're interacting with business owners, they care about only certain things that get them to that end result, right? So like maybe they want more customers, more conversions to build brand, whatever it is. And it starts to me with knowing that my thoughts and ideas aren't more important than their goals. And so understanding that, so while I may have a different opinion on what the project should look like or be, at the end of the day, we're trying to solve a problem that the client has. That's number one. Number two is, and I see this a lot, and it's tough, is when we go on to a location where we're in it now filming, interacting with the client. I personally get what is good enough to achieve the end result of that video. I've worked with people where they care so much about the aesthetic or the minute details that they will notice, people in the industry will notice, but the end consumer won't notice. The business that's hiring you won't care. All that they're seeing, though, in that time is that things are taking very long. They're taking a super long time to set up. You're tweaking things more than it should. You're doing all these, extra work. You're spending 30 minutes, an hour longer than you need to get it 10% better. And that's where the breakdown of things happen, because in the moment, the client doesn't know what the end video is going to look like. So the only way that they can judge the entire experience with you and your company is based off of the initial interaction and meetings that you might have had leading up to the shoot, and then the shoot day. So for me, as long as I can get it in there, do things good enough, and if the client leaves and they're like, that didn't suck, then I've won. Because number one, I don't care which client, any Fortune 500, 100, small brands, doesn't matter. 99.9% of people don't want to be there, don't want to do it, hate being on camera, hate what they look like, hate what they sound like. And so if you can make them say that didn't suck, then you've already won. And what happens is the feedback loop you're going to get once the video is delivered, the finished result, they have a positive association with you and the shoot. They're going to go into that viewing of the edit with a positive mindset, right? And they may look past slight errors or whatever, just something that could be picked apart. However, if you drug things out and they didn't enjoy that process, you are now they're going into that video and viewing it with like, I don't like it, right? They have this is something that might be subconscious, where they are constantly just looking for something wrong with it because they internally feel that something was wrong during the shoot. And that's where I've been able to sort of differentiate myself. Again, it's looking at it from a business perspective and not the artist perspective.
So when you're shooting, do you ever make guarantees with the client? Like, is there something where, you guarantee that I'll turn out a certain way? Or do you tell them like, hey, I can get you this much?
I've never had to guarantee anybody anything.
Okay.
There's no guarantees because, nobody's a professional actor or actress. Typically you're shooting at their business, which you're limited to are people coming and going, what noises are around, right? So like audio won't be perfect. The video won't be perfect unless you have a dedicated location, trained actors, right? Paid actors. Like there's certain levels to video production. And I think that's important because somebody could be watching this and they could be like, oh no, everything's perfect all the time. We have a crew of 30 and everything that you just set up to this point doesn't make sense. True for people at a certain level, right? People that have massive agencies that are doing things at a very high level. This talk though is mainly going for people who are from beginner to even 10 years. There's people that are, 15, 20 years in the game that are still only doing it by themselves, or them and one or two other people where this resonates. So what I'm saying is not correct for everybody. It's just what I've seen and experienced, at least up to the point I'm at right now.
Okay. How would you say that the industry in itself has changed from when you started to where you are now? And with those changes, how have you adapted to like move along with those?
The industry, depending on when you look at when I started, right? Because I've been in the industry a long time, but whenever I started my production company, that I would call it, even though I was just a solo person, right? It was still, I was buying my own gear and doing the whole thing start to finish. It was the GH5s, where Panasonic GH5s came out. Good cameras. You still couldn't trust autofocus, right? We were especially coming from the TV, like live stuff, like everything was manual focus. And so we were dead set, like dead against no autofocus. You can't trust it. It's not professional. And so over the time, as autofocus systems became better and more robust, I now use them for all like talking head, because sometimes when people shift forward or backward and your manual focus, they can move out of like what is considered like sharp, right? So instead of their eye being sharp, maybe they move and now their ears sharp, but their eyes soft. And also just having to sit there for 30-minute, hour, 3-hour long interviews and ride the focus manually. It's just a terrible use of time to me. Like that's like a lot of work for like, it's like such little benefit now that you have autofocus cameras that will do face only, where they'll never hunt and try to, because like that was the issue before. If an autofocus camera lost focus on your face, it would start to search. So it would start to like try to focus on the background. It would just jump all over. Where now there's cameras where face only means if it does not see a face, it is not going to try to focus on anything else. So that has been a big change. And then there's been a few other things that have come into play that have just made things easier, like 32-bit float, which is for audio. It's like raw audio. So basically, like you don't clip, like or it's never too low or too high.
Right.
And so some of those things have allowed us to record stuff maybe without thinking too much about it, or needing an extra audio person there to monitor sound, because the sound's going to be fine regardless. Again, it depends on the type of work people are doing. I still do plenty of work where I hire a dedicated sound person because I just don't want to think about it, right?
Yeah.
But that's kind of a few of like the minute changes, mainly in just the technology of cameras and audio. And I would also say when I first started, I had after a bit, I had a big transit van. I had, C300 Mark III, C500 Mark II, so big cinema cameras, cinema glass, right? Before I trusted autofocus. And when cameras and everything gets bigger, the support for it is bigger, and it takes up more space. So I needed a van. Now that everything is so small, the FX6 that we use, really, really compact.
Yeah.
The FX3, right? Those things have allowed me to shrink what I need to take with me. I sold my van, sold all of that. And I would say the biggest thing that's changed is I went and did a shoot for a client. It was $40,000.
Okay.
Had 2 big cinema cameras, cinema glass, crazy expensive
Monsters.
tripods, like, full grip package. Just, we were in there with lots of stuff. Turned out well. They brought us back, came back like 5 or 6 months later. And at this time, I actually had C70s. So it was Canons, but very small.
Okay.
And I was using photo glass, and I didn't need the big, heavy tripods. So I went smaller. And I brought in 2 aperture lights and a couple light stands. And instead of bringing a van, I now brought it in the back of an SUV. And my footprint was crazy small. And the client did not care, loved the videos. And that was a light switch moment for me, that like, I'm doing all of this big stuff for like me and my ego, and thinking that a client needs or expects that to show up. The industry has changed so much that they don't care. And when I say they don't care, I'm working with major brands I'm
Mhm.
working with just straight up companies that have no clue what cameras are in the first place, right? I would say that the only time people actually care are when you're not a business and you are just a camera operator, a DP. You're a cog in somebody else's wheel where you're being hired by a production company. That's when people care, because I want to kind of differentiate that, because yeah, if you're just a camera operator, yeah, you're probably being hired by a production company or an agency, and they're going to be like, what camera do you use? Because they want to make sure it matches with whatever look or whatever they're doing, right? Or
Right.
whatever they've been doing. But most times, like, everything that is bought and used is mainly for our ego, or because we think that we can't charge as much, as we actually can without the bigger professional gear.
What are some like common financial pitfalls then to avoid when starting your business?
I would say that, leading off of what I just said, it's buying gear that you think is necessary to get work that is not necessary. So like, or to get work, right? Like, so if I were to get a call right now or email to go and do a shoot,
Mm-hmm.
and I told them it was going to be $40,000, I would be happy to show up with like a Sony A6700, like an 800. I don't even know how much the camera costs, like a sub $1,000 camera, and with just the, cheap glass that it comes with, and a single aperture light, and I would show up with that. I wouldn't care, because they wouldn't care, because whenever you're dealing, the way I'm speaking is at least with when you're dealing with businesses and corporations, where you are selling an end result, you're not selling day rates. And I think that that's something that a lot of people and creatives don't understand, and they're stuck. They're stuck in the day rate mindset. And that's, again, if you're just a camera operator on somebody's shoot, then that's the world. That's the right world. That's what you think about. However, if you are a quote unquote production company where you are doing everything start to finish, it's something where you charge based off of what that video does for them,
Okay.
and how much value that they're going to get out of it. Because I can make a video for a small single location business here in town, that I can go make a video for a massive company like John Deere, right? Same exact video. The one place that's in town only stands to make so much, because that video is only going to do so much, and they can only bring in so much revenue from that.
Right.
Versus a massive corporation, they can leverage that video to make them tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes, right? Not every single video, but you see how that discrepancy is like, oh, I'm solving a bigger problem for somebody, I can charge more. And most people just think it's impossible. It's like, there's no way, And what I'll say, and the people that are similar to me in this space,
Mm-hmm.
when we submit, like, hey, here's a quote for how much it's going to cost, here's an estimate, and then when I invoice somebody, there's no line items. It just says video production.
Okay.
And that's where people break down. They break down their day rate, they break down their gear, they break down everything, right? And so to prove to the client why it costs whatever it costs, I'm just say, okay, these are your goals. This is what you want to accomplish. This is how much it's going to cost to accomplish that goal.
Okay.
And so when you're looking at gear and or financial decisions,
Yeah.
of how all this plays out, you don't need to go and buy the expensive gear, the expensive things. You can rent that stuff too, right? If you need to. There's plenty of companies out there where you can just rent it, and then you can charge whatever you want. Like, you don't need to go, buy $15,000-$20,000 worth of gear just so you could start charging $2,000 or $3,000 a day.
Mm-hmm.
You can start charging that right now with whatever you have, if you position yourself correctly to the client.
Okay. What are your goals for the future of your business?
So in the past 7 to 8 months, I've taken my video production company and moved it from a small office into what is now a full film studio,
Mm-hmm.
which is Studio 81. And it initially started out as a studio to be rented out to other videographers and photographers. I've kind of transitioned it to more of a content creation studio. That way, not only can it be used by the creatives around here, but also businesses and personal brands. And then when we made that shift, I started hiring more people. And what that allowed me to do was to have more free time, because my biggest time suck was editing.
Right.
And that's most people's biggest time suck, because they go do a project and they sit behind a computer for like 8 hours a day. Number one, not healthy. And number two, it's just a bad use of your time if you are trying to be a production company, because then the time that you could be meeting and making new relationships and connections with future clients, or talking to current clients and trying to upsell them on something, just anything else that is working towards, more revenue, more clients, more projects, is better spent doing that and then outsourcing or hiring an editor. And so once I started bringing those people on, like an editor, I got to a point where, we got caught up on projects, and my editor is going to sit there and might not have anything to edit for a bit. So let me just pose the question in Facebook groups of, hey, I have a vetted editor. We're doing edits for some of the largest brands in the world. Would anybody be interested in maybe outsourcing some of their current projects that, they haven't been able to get to, because again, most people that's their bottleneck, and to us, because we could start to do this for you. It's somebody that's been thoroughly vetted. We went through over 200 applicants to get down to this editor. Jeez. And that's what we're doing now for the editors that we're bringing on. You have to hire people a certain way. And if you don't know how to hire somebody correctly, and you just put a blatant, I need an editor, most people listening and watching have experienced this. They'll have 30 people that respond, and they're like, I don't know. It almost becomes overwhelming, and you don't know what to do. And then the same happens where you just get emails all the time from people. Oh, video editing. And it's just like, it seems scammy or spammy. And so most people don't do that. But going into your question of, plans for the future, one thing that we've noticed was when I posed that question about if anybody would like to use our editor, I had so many responses, and I hopped on some calls, and everybody had the same problem that I had right up until I started my, hiring people. And so it's been a huge, just eye-opening experience that everybody's suffering from this problem. Nobody trusts what's currently out there, even though there's a million editors out there.
Right.
And so I've decided that I'm going to start another company, which is a remote editing business where people can send us their footage, their projects, and we're using editors that have been fully vetted, that get a good salary, they're paid, they get great benefits, and then they're also quality controlled, right? So we're making sure that the edits are what we would expect before they're delivered to the client. And so this is something that I'm shifting my focus on right now to really find the right editors, have the right project managers and client success managers. That way, as soon as we're bringing people on, everybody's kind of like super happy. We're not dropping the ball anywhere.
Would this new business of yours focus mostly on corporate video, or would it deal in all sorts of editing in terms of corporate, creative?
So it's going to be a mixture, because my clients are not all the same avatar, right? And most people's clients aren't all the same avatar. Some are, but like, I think the way that we will differentiate ourselves is a lot of if you go hire an editor, a lot of them are like short form reels,
mm-hmm.
right? Which is great to have that. But I find that there's a true lack of solid corporate long form editors. Just people that aren't doing hype reels. It's where you need to go and take maybe a few different interviews, pull out story from it, and tell a concise short story from those interviews, versus people that are used to, hey, here's a vertical shot video that's meant to be a 60-second reel where I'm just going to like add some like zooms and cut out some of the pauses, add some B-roll and some text animation. Our editors will be able to do that. We will have specific editors that are specialized in just that.
Okay.
So that way we can take care of those clients. And we're already doing that right now. We have one company where we're doing 38 edits per month just for one of their clients, and they have multiple clients. And that's on the short form side, right? Whereas we have other projects that, because we just onboarded some new clients for this, where they're doing gala videos for a breast cancer company. And so they're cutting long form, multi-person, multi-cam interviews, right, of a very sensitive subject, and then how this organization helps those survivors, right?
Right.
And the whole point of these videos are to entice people to want to open their pocketbooks and donate to the cause, so that that organization can continue to do the work that they're doing. And so, we don't want to take a Reels editor that's like super good at like really fast car stuff and then try to make them also really good at story, and then also try to make them really good at, everything. Cause like if you're a master of like, if you think you can do everything, you're not really a master of one thing. And like, that's where we want to kind of differentiate ourselves, is that we're going to make you like really solid stuff, whether it's corporate, long form, short form. And we're not going to just templatize it, where I feel like that's where a lot of these, like when you outsource it, they're throwing it into like this like template thing where it just like spits out something and it looks the same as everybody else's. So we're offering from corporate to just cool and trendy, to brand building, to testimonial, to educational.
So it's a very wide array of what you're
correct. But again, we're building that slowly, and we're finding the right editors for certain, types of edits.
Gotcha. Is there a way you're testing the editors that you hire at all?
So when the onboarding or the hiring process, go through 200 candidates, then out of those 200, the ones that we feel would be a good fit are sent an initial assessment. They take the initial assessment. Once we get that back, if we feel like it's a good fit still from there, they could do a first interview. And that first interview is with the person that is trained to ask specific questions that are geared towards that role, right? What we're looking for. If that goes well, then that person is then sent to pretty much the head HR manager to then ask more in-depth questions that will not only touch on their skill set, but also on their personality, because we want to make sure that we're hiring people that are trainable, moldable. Because the one thing is that other people that are bringing us their work, they all have a different opinion of what is right or what they like than me. So the people that we're bringing on have to be malleable to where they can sort of take that constructive criticism, understand it, and then make it what the client wants it to be. So they have to be, good listeners and good at receiving that critical feedback to make those revisions. Once it goes past that person, it is then, that's the first time I even know about this person. Okay. So then I get to watch a video recording of everything, all of those interactions to make sure it's the right fit. And then I send them a test edit, right? It's a paid test edit, so they're not doing it for free. Send them a paid test edit and give them the criteria and see what they do. And then that way I can judge, hey, this is better than I was expecting. This is about what I was expecting. This is good enough, but I want to send them revision requests to see how they take constructive feedback, to see how if they can make it what we want.
Right.
Or this isn't in the ballpark. I don't think that even, constructive criticism is going to get us to where we want to be, because, the skill set and like where they're at right now and their decision making just doesn't make sense.
Got it.
So yeah, there is a test. I just want to go through the whole system just so that like it's a lengthy process.
Yeah. Last question for you. Just what advice would you give someone who is thinking about doing what you do, and just kind of a couple of do's and do nots when you're getting into this kind of stuff?
For sure. So if you were looking at getting into video production, I would say number one, film school doesn't make sense for like almost everybody. It used to in the past, mainly because you would make good connections, and that would only matter if you were actually going to work in the film industry where you're making movies or TV shows, right? Mainly movies. So number one, education doesn't matter. Nobody cares about it. YouTube is the phenomenal way to get your start. That's where I learned. That's where almost everybody else I know has gotten their education. It's just you have to be proactive and know who to follow, who to trust, right? I mean, everybody out there is going to give you pretty much the same basic stuff on how to expose and shoot for the most part. But the issue when you are watching YouTube, and it's just the nature of YouTube and the nature of people, is that you're going to come across so much gear related content about like this camera, right? This lens, what's the best. And it's because, people just think that the camera is going to be the thing that solves a problem, right? And a lot of people just love tech, right? And so they're like looking for the best, and they keep watching it. So they're learning about camera and film or video production, but then the algorithm is going to feed them all this gear stuff, and then people start to have gas. So gear acquisition syndrome, where they're just always buying gear, right? Because they think that that's what's going to make them better.
Not practice.
That's and that's the thing, is like that is not true, right? But I mean, I make gear videos too because people, that's what they consume, right? And if you're trying to grow, you feed what the algorithm wants to feed people and what they like. So, I would say to watch the gear videos, especially if you're going to buy your camera for the first time. But at the end of the day, again, any camera will work if you're doing it for yourself and for clients, and not again for like a cog in somebody else's wheel.
Right.
But I would say learn lighting.
Okay.
Learn lighting and just learn what makes an image look like a good image. Like when you're shooting B-roll, like there's some things that are just so simple, but people still get them wrong. If you can light something well and you can create depth in an image, and then if you can tell a good story through the edit, then like that's all this is. I think people make things way too hard, and they overcomplicate everything. So I would say to start there, I would say that start filming with your iPhone. That's what I did.
Yeah.
I started filming with my iPhone, and I was like, oh, this is actually, I have a knack for it, versus, oh, that looks terrible. There's just certain things, like some people might have an eye for it, some people might not. And everything is trainable. You can train people to do anything, right?
Right.
But it's always better to start as small and nimble as you can, because the one thing that I did was I got so much stuff, and I've bought so much stuff that I've just like used once, never used because I thought it was good, right? And then the longer I do this, the less stuff I want to have, own, or use, because it just makes everything just so much harder.
You only use a couple of like basic cameras as like your main cameras, right? You would say.
Yeah, all my lenses are basic. All my cameras I have 2 cameras, and my lenses are the cheap. They're not G-Master. I use it. I'm in the Sony ecosystem. I'm using cheap Sony glass. There's a 35 millimeter 1.8 that's on me right now. I think I paid like $300 for that lens, $400. I have an 85 1.8. I paid around $350 for it. My main lens for all my clients, paying me a lot of money for all the B-roll, is the Sony 24-105, which I bought used for $850. And everybody's looking at all the cinema glass, all the G Master stuff, which is like 2,000 plus per lens.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not necessary, at least for the clients I work with. And I'm doing work for Honda. I'm doing work for John Deere. I'm doing work for massive companies, and nobody knows, nobody cares. And that's I think in my world, if you're looking at going and making videos for businesses, that's number one. Number two, the thing that I want everybody to know
Mm-hmm.
is, yes, people cannot afford your rates because you're going after the coffee shop, the barber, the hairdresser, the business in town that has one location. And, oh yeah, I can't charge $3,000 a day. Of course not. A barber shop, do you know how many haircuts he's going to have to do to just recoup $3,000 and profit?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make any sense for him to pay you the type of rates that, like, when I say 40 grand, yeah, most small businesses aren't going to be able to afford 40 grand because you're talking to the wrong people.
Yeah.
And I, in the beginning, wanted to help those people, but it's just, you get to a point where, like, are you helping people or are you running a business? Because charity versus business, you got to make the decision. Nothing wrong with now what I do, where I make the $40,000 shoot, and then I have free time. A local business needs something for $1,000. I will go do that.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I can choose. But if I'm only limited to, like, the coffee shops, I never make enough money to feel like I can go do that type of work. And so that's a huge thing. And then the third thing, I really, really just want to put this out there. When people are giving a bid to so somebody comes to you, hey, I want this. How much is it going to cost? And they give a number, and they don't get the work, and they think I was too expensive. Well, a lot of times, and I know this because I've been told this by many bids that I've won, you were the most expensive by twice from the other people.
Mm-hmm.
And we went with you because you're expensive for a reason, right? So number one, they automatically, without even knowing anything about me, thought that I was, like, better. Even if the work that we had to show looked exactly the same, there's a preconceived notion that more expensive equals better quality. Something's better.
Okay.
So number one, they bid, they didn't get it. They think they're too expensive. So they lower their price. But what happens? They actually went the opposite way of what they needed to do. Because if I'm expensive and I'm getting the work and you're going down, you're never going to get those jobs. Because what happens is, like, if I'm going to go buy a car,
right,
and I'm like, okay, I'm at a point in my life where I want a car that's reliable. I know it's going to get me to point A, from point A to point B. I don't have to worry about it ever breaking down. Used car, I got to spend at least 20 grand at minimum,
right,
to get a nice used car. So I'm going to go to the lot. I'm going to look for a car between 20 and 25,000. That's what I feel comfortable with spending.
Okay.
I go to your lot and you try to sell me a $5,000 car. I am never considering it, because to me, that's going to break down soon. That's going to need lots of work. It's probably has high miles. And so, like, you think I'm not buying because I'm like, I can't afford it, or that the price is too high. But it's like, no, my preconceived thought is that to have something good, it's going to cost this amount of money. And you're trying to sell it to me for a quarter or a fifth of what I'm expecting, right?
Right.
Or you try to sell me a $15,000 or $12,000 car, right? No, like, still, like, that's getting close to the end of its, like, life. It's going to become more expensive. I don't trust it. And so instead of you coming down on price, you need to show me something that's more expensive. And that's the opposite of what people think, especially when they just don't hear back from the person, or, hey, we've decided to go in another way. Typically, you don't get to ask why, or what are you paying to the other person, right?
Right.
And so that's, like, the biggest mind F that plagues people, is they're often moving the wrong way on the ladder. And then now they're just catering to people that don't have any money. And that's That's the worst thing to do. Raise your prices by 2 instead of cutting your prices by half.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all the questions I had for you.
Sweet.
So
Yeah. Well, I
appreciate it.
hope you guys found this talk informative, intuitive. I feel like there's so many things that videographers and creatives just get wrong because it doesn't seem like that it makes any sense, but they're looking at money from their personal experience with money and not from a business's experience with money. Because to you, $5,000 might be a lot of money, and a business might spend $50,000 on pens for their offices, and $5,000 is nothing to them. So change your mindset, change your life. We'll see you next time.